Good morning, everybody. Well, welcome to Cup of Jonah. I hope you have your nice cup of coffee and are ready for the next question, the next chapter in our ponderings about God. This is a good one. Chapter 15. Morning, Templar. That God is eternal. And remember, just because I appreciate and respect the knee-jerk reaction, if religion isn't your thing, by God, as you remember from what we've talked about so far in this book, all we've established so far is that there must be some cause of all causes, a first cause, and there must be some unmoved mover. Otherwise, nothing could exist and nothing could move. And that's what we're calling God. So, from what we have said, it is further apparent that God is eternal. Everything that begins to be or ceases to be does so through motion or change. Since, however, we have shown that God is absolutely immutable, he is eternal, lacking all beginning or end. Now, if you remember when we established that, it was in God's existence when we talked about God being, he said God is all act and no potency. Remember, potency is that philosophical concept of the ability to be something that you're not, that you could actually be, that potency or power, the potential to be versus actually being something. So in that sense, there can't be any change if there's no potency to change, if there's no ability to change. So God is immutable. Also, because change is a motion, and if the unmoved mover is not moving, then there can't be any motion, right? No immutability. Again, those beings alone are measured by time that are moved. For time is made clear in the physics is a number of motion, or you could say a measure of motion as well. But God, as has been proved, is absolutely without motion and is consequently not measured. Not measured by time, excuse me. There is therefore no before and after in him. He does not have being after non-being, or non-being after being, nor can any succession be found in his being. For none of these characteristics can be understood without time. God, therefore, is without beginning and end, having his whole being at once. In this consists the nature of eternity. What is more, if it were true that there was a time when he existed after not existing, then he must have been brought by someone from non-being to being, not by himself, since what does not exist cannot act. If by another, then this other is prior to God, but we have shown that God is the first cause. Hence he did not begin to be, nor consequently will he cease to be. For that which has been everlastingly has the power to be everlastingly. God is therefore eternal. And to put it another way, too, if you think about it, since what we're calling God is that first unmoved mover, if you say that of the thing that we're pointing to and calling that name, if it did not exist and then come to be like he's saying here, then something else had to make him come to be. In other words, we just misnamed it, move it back one. Now that whatever that thing is that brought this thing that we accidentally called God, oops, we actually shouldn't have. It's that other thing that brought him to be. That's what we should be calling God. So regardless how far we want to go back, if we want to say that this thing that we're calling God is eternal, is not eternal, then whatever made him to be is actually what we should be calling God. So you just move the name back up the line until you finally get to that unmoved mover, the thing that's always been, because there has to be something that's always been. We find in the world, furthermore, certain beings, those namely that are subject to generation and corruption, which can be and not be. But what can be has a cause, because since it is equally related to two contraries, namely being and not being, it must be owing to some cause that being accrues to it. In other words, there has to be something that caused it to come to be. Now, as we have proved by the reasoning of Aristotle, one cannot proceed to infinity among causes. We must therefore posit something that is a necessary being. Every necessary being, however, either has the cause of its necessity in an outside source, or if it does not, it is necessary through itself. But one cannot proceed to infinity among necessary beings, the cause of whose necessity lies in an outside source. We must therefore posit a first necessary being, which is necessary through itself. This is God, since, as we have shown, he is the first cause. God, therefore, is eternal, since whatever is necessary through itself is eternal. From the everlastingness of time, likewise, Aristotle shows the everlastingness of motion, from which he further shows the everlastingness of the moving substance. Now, the first moving substance is God. God is therefore everlasting. If we deny the everlastingness of time and motion, we are still able to prove the everlastingness of the moving substance. For if motion had a beginning, it must have done so through some moving cause. If this moving cause began, it did so through the action of some cause. Hence, either one will proceed to infinity, or he will arrive at a moving cause that had no beginning. To this truth, divine authority offers witness. The psalmist says, "Be thou, O Lord, endurest forever." But thou, O Lord, endurest forever. And he goes on to say, "But thou art always the self-same, and thy years shall not fail." I love that. So, what's interesting here too is that if time is a measurement of movement, this is where I disagree with some of the ideas that are popular out there or talked about right now, even amongst some of us at the Phone Booth podcast, about this idea of like parallel timelines. I think it's an imaginarily interesting idea to ponder. But when you start to think about what time is just a measurement of motion. So either things are moving or they're not. And if they're moving, how do we tell how fast they're moving or what caused what to move, what came first and what comes later? It's all a function of us measuring and comparing and relating things to each other. I mean, my timeline personally can change by my choices. I can make better choices and have a better future, or more terrible choices and have a more difficult future. But either way, I'm affecting my experience as time rolls on, so to speak, because there's a lot of motion of the stars and, of the world around me that I have no control over. So I can affect how my life interacts with that reality outside of myself, but I can't change all of creation, all of reality. And there aren't parallel existing realities, it would seem. I mean, we'll talk more about different things like that down the road. But the other thing that's interesting is the motion of the planets, of the wandering stars and the stars in the heavens. The ancients considered to be eternal motion because it was ever the same and never decayed. There was no change in the motion. There was no ceasing to be or coming to be of any motions in the stars. So very interesting stuff. The other thing is, an interesting subpoint he made there is you can't be anything that has come to be has to have come to be from something that already was. So this notion of the Big Bang, for example, where all this alleged vast, almost quasi-infinite, almost infinite expanse of space, ever expanding space, as they call it, that doesn't make any sense logically, first of all. But also, how did all of that come to be from nothing? Something had to cause everything to be. So, interesting stuff, how you can see that just like little reflections on the nature of movement and the nature of the natures of causes and how things interact, and how, he said that something can't accrue being, and right, so something can't accrue being without some other thing giving it being, so to speak, right, or bringing it into being from non-being. So, good morning, Meyer. Thank you for reposting. Please do repost, folks. Yes, I as you've heard me say before, I love my cup of Jonah with you guys. It's wonderful. So I appreciate you all being here. Yeah. Any thoughts on those ideas there? It's beautiful how simple it is. Oftentimes when we hear a lot of these theories floating around, some of them are really interesting thought experiments, absolutely, and interesting things to ponder. But that's where I think the value of these kinds of philosophical considerations, where we take a step back and kind of deductively parse out what's possible and what's contradictory and what makes sense and what doesn't. There has to be a single, eternal, unmoved mover that caused all things. We know that now. Tell us more about you. You should do affirmations as well. I think it's a great way to start the morning for people. I appreciate that, Meyer. Well, all right. At your request, Meyer, I'll share a little bit. I think a lot of you guys know me already, but if you're newer here to the Phone Booth crew, or to this podcast, my formation, I was in the monastery for a while, and my formation, I had a number of years of philosophical training, and I studied Aristotle, even occasionally in the original Greek. Most of it was not in the original Greek. I'm embarrassed to admit. No, I'm just kidding. And then theology as well. But as you can see, a lot of Thomas Aquinas's theology is grounded in and based in Aristotle. And you can see how delightful these ponderings of Aristotle are. They're very grounded. Like, I think there's this misnomer about a philosophy that because of a lot of the modern philosophers who are like, oh, everything's relative, and like Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Well, because you reflected on the fact that you think, that you recognize that there's a cognition, a consciousness, that it goes beyond your physicality, right? Okay, cool. That I can get behind. But we don't exist or cause our own existence or the existence of things around us by thinking about them. Anyways, there's a lot of the modern, especially like the Hegel, and a lot of the more modern philosophers. It's very hard to read. It's very abstract. It's very self-contradictory oftentimes. And so you have this kind of like aloof impression of philosophy, where philosophers are just like in their head, spacey, kind of disconnected with reality. But when you go back to like how the ancients, they're like, oh, things are corruptible, things move. What do we know about the universe? Because I see things moving. Right? It's like very, very grounded, and very reasonable, and very refreshing in the simplicity of, it's very precise thought, but it's very simple thought, which I love. I love you too, Meyer. Good to see you, Shiva. Do check out, thank you for the reminder, Meyer. See, I tend to get right into the philosophy. phoneboothpodcast.substack.com. That's where you can find a whole list of all of the episodes here, also on Spotify. And then, of course, there's a lot of other episodes there on the Phone Booth Podcast. Everything from the Phone Booth podcast itself to Dualistic and Here's the Thing and Philosopher King, which is Wednesdays at 7 p.m. EST. So do check it out, poke around, lots of interesting things. And one of the beautiful things about the Phone Booth production group is a lot of us don't agree on a lot of things. And that's beautiful because we have that opportunity, because we all respect each other, to wrestle with each other over these ideas. And so by tuning in and kind of watching those conversations, especially the live streams, the Saturday live streams where the four of us, Snoop, Ted, Vince, the four of us kind of wrestle with ideas right there for all of you to see and participate in the chat, right? It's kind of neat because it's, we all do see the world. There's similarities with the way we see the world, obviously. But it's that mutual respect that I really appreciate, where we can kind of wrestle with these ideas and disagree with each other, as men are wont to do. But no, I appreciate you guys tuning in. A little bit of a shorter reading again this morning. Teaser trailer again tomorrow. We're going to talk about no passive potency in God and what that means. And then, is there matter in God? Can God have a body of some kind? Which is kind of a trick question. Because eventually later we'll ask whether or not God became incarnate. So originally, but again, what are we saying? If God can't change, that's another mystery. If God can't change, then how did he become incarnate, right? So these are all really interesting questions. So we'll actually take a very honest look at the claim of the incarnation and what that means. Is that even possible? But we're going to look at all of these things from a logical, philosophical standpoint and evaluate whether or not it's possible. Morning, Ted. The other thing, again, I just want to remind, kind of point it out again, is that, again, because obviously it's no secret that I'm a traditional Catholic. I love my faith, but I also look at the Vatican today and I'm like, yeah, that's not, nope, nope. But you can see Thomas, even though in this book we're taking a very philosophical, logical, rational approach evaluating these truths. You can see though the place he comes from. He's very honest, obviously, and like he's a Catholic, a Bible believing Catholic as well. And so it's so beautiful that at the end of each one of these chapters, like I mentioned yesterday, I think it was, he ends by saying, to this truth, divine authority offers witness. So now instead, notice the subtlety. We're not starting from Scripture and arguing and discussing the topics that Scripture reveals. We're starting from reason and parsing out these things that we now are figuring out, so to speak, or recognizing are true by our reason. And then he's like, oh yeah, but this is also in Scripture. So he's kind of showing that all these subtle, nuanced, philosophical ideas appear in one way or another in Scripture, which is interesting. So he just kind of ends this chapter again, just to read the last few lines again. To this truth, divine authority offers witness. The psalmist says, but thou, O Lord, endurest forever. He goes on to say, but thou art always the self same, and thy years shall not fail. Love that. It's funny. Someone told me years ago, there's that psalmist also said, I waited for the Lord, and he stooped down to me. Someone told me, God is never a moment late, so you can always trust him. But he's never a moment early either, and that's the hard part, is waiting on the Lord. And it makes sense. If God's eternal, and he's not moving through time like we are, then it makes sense that any action that he were to take, so to speak, any influence on our lives or the world around us, the timing is perfect. We want it to be early because we want that peace of mind. So waiting for the answer to a question or the answer to a prayer or the answer to a difficulty or the resolution of a difficulty or the assistance in overcoming a challenge, all these things, like in our humanity, because we are progressing through time and we see the problem or experience the difficulty, with that delay, it feels like it takes forever. It feels like but that's where we can trust his timing is perfect. But he's never early, and that's the hard part. So if you are dealing with a personal struggle right now, an unanswered prayer or a stress or something in front of you that you have to make a decision on, invite the Almighty, the Eternal One, into it, but then be patient, because he may not act immediately after you ask. Likely won't, but that doesn't mean he won't. So anyhow, thank you for joining me for Cup of Jonah this morning. Always a pleasure and a joy. And I will see you guys tomorrow for another warm cup of Jonah. Have a good day, guys.